Hi, my name is Sophie Summers. Now, if you're interested in news, views, product reviews and interviews that are related to the cross-dressing, transgendered or the drag world, welcome to the channel. As they say, you're certainly in the right place. Now, if you haven't already done so, please do consider hitting the subscribe button and pushing the notification bell down below. That way, you'll be notified of all our latest uploads, and as they say, you can become a part of the conversation. I'd highly appreciate that. Now, before I do dive into today's quite heavy subject matter, in our last upload, we ran a competition giving away 3 dresses. Thank you for all those people that entered. And as promised, I will be announcing the winners towards the end of this video, plus, of course, details of this week's giveaway. So please stay tuned. Okay, let's get into today's rather heavy subject matter. Now, the chances are that in your life you probably asked yourself, or certainly being asked, why do you cross-dress? Well, I've covered that aspect in a lot of previous videos, and more recently in a video with the wonderful Savannah Hoax, where she expertly covered most of the major questions and bases. Now, if you've missed that particular video, the link is down in the description below. I would suggest you can have a watch. That's quite a good watch, actually. However, getting back onto today's track, your starter question for 10, as they say. Have you ever heard of DSM-5, paraphilia or paraphilic disorders? The chances are, unless you're transitioning or have sought guidance from a therapist or counsellor, the chances are you knowing or hearing those terms is actually quite remote, I'd imagine. In fact, I had no idea what they actually meant or the significance of them until fairly recently. It was my partner, Krista, who brought the particular items to my attention, and she is studying criminal psychology. So there's a little bit of a hint or a clue there. Now, it's fair to say that cross-dressing or transvesticism is not generally viewed in a positive light by sections of the general public or the damn mainstream media, for that matter of fact, an issue I'm sure you and I are very familiar with. Now, what does interest me is the role played by the medical and psychological professions, in particular the way they classify behaviour. Now, I want to know what sort of their classifications, how it does influence general opinions. Now, having said that, let me go all the way back to the opening statement, which was a reference to the DSM-5, which basically stands for, if I did it right, the Diagnostics and Statistical Manual, version 5. Now, for all intensive purposes, that's like the good old-fashioned Haynes manual or a reference manual for conditions used by psychologists and therapists. It basically defines parameters for a condition or a disorder. Interesting that we have this terminology, but I will move on. Now, if you are going through transition, the likelihood is that you will be diagnosed for gender dysphoria or transvestic fetishism. Now, there are markers in the DSM-5 that guide you towards which sort of category of disorder you are in. Now, I want to take a brief moment to think about that for a minute. Now, I do personally feel a little uncomfortable with the words suffer and disorder, but this is a language used throughout the text, so I'm going to move on. I also believe that if you do not fit into any of the categories in the DSM, the insurance companies do not cover the payments for the treatment, so there may be a little bit of underlying pharmaceutical sort of issues here when it comes to diagnostics and mental conditions, but that's a by the by, I think. It's probably more relevant to people in North America where it's all private healthcare than us here in the UK. Bit of a moot point, but it's worth knowing about. So basically established very simply what DSM is. What about the other 2 terms I've thrown at you? Now, I personally hate labels, but I do appreciate their ability to identify or at least outline things. So I'm going to start with paraphilia, 17 letters, if you're playing Scrabble, by the way, or 17 score, not 17 letters. I've come across several definitions for the word, which in itself is quite disconcerting, and as you can see on the screen here, one that's such a definition, and to be quite frank, it does twist my tiny little brain cells to the point of explosion trying to understand that. But please stick with me, it does get even more actually interesting. Now, in lay terms, cross-dressing, nay, transvesticism is considered a paraphilia. Now, having established that, we can move on to what to me is a bit more of an interesting combination. And that's a negative terminology of paraphilia. It becomes a paraphilic disorder. Now, I'm not going to lay out all the paraphilic disorders because As you can see coming up on the screen here, they are a little bit sort of tongue twisty and very difficult to understand. So I'm just going to let you absorb those terms in a minute. Particularly a couple of them are a little bit, to me, a little bit sensitive. Now, I'm not sure at this point if you're going to agree with me, but to be told you have a disorder, by definition, means you are out of order and therefore in need of fixing or amending to bring you back into order. Now, maybe it's me being oversensitive or maybe a bit analytical, but I find it's somewhat stigmatizing to be categorized as having a form of philia. After all, the less informed people, they could associate paraphilia with that horrible one, paedophilia, which is just a thought. And as I say, I think that's probably enough already. Now, whilst my thoughts and findings may not be 100% intellectually accurate, it does suggest that some of the terminology used within the medical profession is particularly counterproductive. Those potentially counterproductive terms are, in a way, another tool that the less versed members of the public could latch on to the claim or support the statement, yes, you've guessed it, you're not normal, are you? Well, folks, I'm as normal in a man's clothes as I am in a woman's clothes, so as they say, pick the brains out of that. Now, I always believe in the concept of understanding oneself before judging others. Whilst nothing I've said is particularly earth-shattering, it may help to be aware of some of these things anyway. People view cross-dressing in such an archaic way, in my opinion, and appears to be supported by the medical profession in the way in which they label it. So, I don't know if you agree or disagree on that one. Now, if the channel can in some way help to balance that disorder, I think we're doing quite well. Now, in fairness of balance, I have to say that I initially lost it when I come to looking or reading that DSM-2 and 3, and there have been certain conditions that have been outsourced or updated. Mind you, the recent sort of news about transgenders in the public and in news in general, I think is kind of doesn't really reflect the positivity or going forward of the medical trade anyway. So, moving on a little bit, or changing the subject. Now, I did say a little bit earlier that I would be announcing the 3 winners of this week's or last week's dress competition. And there were an awful lot of entries, so I'm very pleased to say that the people have already been notified, but for the record, they are Amanda Rose Hodgkins, Tina Simpson and Pat Oliver. So I hope you ladies enjoy your new dresses, and I'd love to see the pictures as and when they arrive. Now, that was a little bit of an overview of a couple of terms that I've sort of come recently fairly familiar with, and they did twist my brain a bit. But it's quite interesting, I think, the way that the medical profession, particularly the psychologists, view our mental condition. They always like to put us into little boxes, and I just don't feel comfortable with the terminology disorder. I don't know about you on that one. But let's lighten the mood up a little bit by setting this week's competition. Now, there is a little link again down below that goes to our website, and on there is a little form to fill in with a simple little question to win a Agnes wig, which is one of the ones I wore fairly recently in the 30 wigs for less than £30 video. It's a very short, a blondish or platinum blonde 1930s inspired bob. So that's going to go to some lucky viewer. So I hope you found that sort of a very disjointed little bit of information there of some sort of interest. It certainly sort of put me on edge when I first started to do a little bit of research on this, and I do feel for my fellow sisters that are going through transition, and particularly having to do this psychological evaluation so they can put you into a box. So I always believe that being armed with the information makes you that little bit more prepared if you do have to go through that particular thing. So let me close by saying thank you very much for watching. As always, stay safe, stay gorgeous, and until the next time, bye bye.